your listening enjoyment in the future. Okay, so today, the coming earthquake in IIS and SQL Server configuration management. Our two speakers today are two very, very knowledgeable folks in the industry. The first one is Robin Fuller. He's a co-founder of Trifectus and Chief Software Architect of Orca. And then we also have Christy McDougall, who leads product engineering for Orca. And both are going to hopefully give you guys some really great and useful information today. Welcome, Robin and Christy. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Charlene.
Thanks, Charlene.
So Christy, why don't I just go ahead and turn it over to you, and you guys can go ahead.
Sounds good. Hello, everybody. Today, like Charlene said, we're going to be talking to you about the coming earthquake in IIS and SQL Server configuration management. And just to give you a preview of what's to come during the webinar, first I'm going to give you a very quick history lesson around configuration management. Then we're going to talk about some of the tremors we've been seeing along the way with configuration management. And then lastly, we'll talk about that coming earthquake in configuration management. And this is the good kind of earthquake, not the bad kind of earthquake.
The earth-moving kind of earthquake.
Yes, the earth-moving kind of earthquake. All right, so in the beginning, I promised a history lesson. So in the beginning, there were scripts. And they were good, mostly. And I want to pause here and say that in the beginning there were scripts if you're lucky, right? Because a lot of people did still have to do things manually. A lot of companies I even still work with today are in a manual world where they're still logging into servers, whether they're development servers or production servers, and having to open up IIS or having to open up SQL Server Management Studio and make manual configuration changes, or opening up RDP sessions to be able to see differences between environments. So yes, in the beginning there were scripts, but there's also manual work as well in the beginning.
Right.
But are scripts fragile? Are they easily broken? Are they that kind of bull in the china shop that's charging ahead, changing everything in their path? And the unfortunate answer is yes. In fact, Gartner talks a lot about the fragility of scripts, and I do see that a lot in our industry, that kind of bull in a china shop making any change that needs to be made, whether it's a good change or a bad change.
Right. Most people start with one goal with a script, just to do a little bit of automation, and then the script grows and grows, and they just sort of brute force everything. So.
Yes. Yeah. Until you have one massive script. Yes. And we've never done that at Orca.
Oh, no.
And also too, whenever you're talking about scripts, even well-intentioned changes can deploy typos. And if you're trying to execute a PowerShell script or execute some sort of batch script that's supposed to fix something that maybe was broken, there are a lot of times where a break fix actually turns into what we like to call a break worse. And at best, that can cause performance problems down the line. And at worst, we've seen that cause outages. And I do just want to pause here to say a little bit of anecdote, kind of going back to what Robin said a minute ago. A company I've been working with they traditionally had around a 4,000 line PowerShell script. And this PowerShell script managed configuration change and deployment to their SharePoint and IIS environments. And it got run once a month, and it was hard-coded. So the top 100 lines of the PowerShell script were whatever needed to be coded in for that script for the month, and they would send it to production support, who would run it at 2 a.m. and the team would wait up every month at 2 a.m. and every time they got a call, because it's so easy to fat finger something. It's easy for an environment variable to get set incorrectly if you're manually changing the PowerShell script, and so they were up every single month triaging this 4,000 line PowerShell script. And so it's not just in theory that these outages happen. We see this all the time where companies are in the news in a negative way. And actually, a couple of weeks ago, a company called Scottrade, they misconfigured SQL Server. They actually said it was manual configuration change that caused the issue that caused 20,000 customer files to be exposed to the world. So this is not just a theory thing. And really, too, we've done a bunch of surveys, and we found that this scripting is not free. It's not free because more than 50% or 33% say that they're spending more than 50% of their time writing and maintaining scripts. And every time I see this number, I kind of wonder, I wonder if they wish they were doing something else.
You'd think so.
And so A, it's not free, but B, it's also not risk-free. We find that 30% of respondents say if the author or the maintainer of the scripts leave, they have no viable solution in place to keep that going. It's kind of that house of popsicle sticks where you're afraid to touch it. We do get a lot of companies that come to us and say, everything worked until the author left or the author of this homegrown tool left, and now we're kind of stuck. We don't want to touch it. We're afraid to break it. And so it's really not risk-free either.
Yeah, actually, I think we were at a company a few months ago, and they run this script almost nightly, I think it was, and they aren't exactly sure what it does, but the author of the script left a few years prior, and they had just been kept on running it because, you know, it kept things going, but they don't know what it.
They don't know what it does.
Right? Yeah. So it's
yeah, it happens a lot.
What can happen. Yeah.
It happens a lot.
It is crazy.
All right, so in summary, scripting was the best available option of the 20th century. And that's assuming if you were lucky enough to have the scripted solution. And today we're seeing what's being dubbed the semi-automated era, but I would almost argue that it's still the semi-manual era. And that's the era of automation frameworks, where you have this tool now that's provided, whether that's an open source tool or a commercial tool, that provides the automation framework for you, but you're still required to do the scripting within the framework to get your job done. And what we see in these tools is to deploy a change, you're still having to go through a bunch of different steps, everywhere from searching for modules, whether you're searching for PowerShell commandlets or a batch script or modules from the open source community for open source tools. Then you're having to select the best fitting thing, checking for updates, and yes, this is kind of tedious, but this is a tedious process. You're going through, you're checking environment dependencies. Oftentimes, companies that have security policies have to inspect each line of an open source script they get. You're having to edit it if it doesn't work off the shelf, test it, deploy it, document it, and then hope the person that wrote it doesn't leave.
Yeah, right. So how far have we advanced really here?
Yes, right. Well, and then too, something else I get a lot is there's a lot of automation out there for the Linux Unix world, but not so much for Windows. And a lot of the automation frameworks out there, they'll say, yes, we can support your Windows environments. Oh, but wait, you're going to need to learn a new declarative language, or you're going to need to learn a new scripting language that's not really meant for Windows, such as Ruby or something else. So you're having to train your staff or hire an SME to manage a non-Windows scripting language some of the time. So tomorrow, what we want to see tomorrow is that configuration management earthquake. And tomorrow's tools, they're not going to focus at that operating server tier. They're going to focus from the application down. And really, especially as we move to cloud environments, as we progress, you shouldn't care about, is this operating system configuration correct? What your manager cares about, what your CIO cares about, what everyone cares about is the business critical application running? Exactly. And so looking at things from the top down, managing the configurations of the application, the middleware, and the database are where things are headed from that perspective.
It doesn't matter where things are running, it matters that they are
running. They're performing, they're secure, they're available.
Right.
Exactly. And I like to use this analogy here. We thought we were automated before when we were Fred Flintstone with our car, that we had to move our legs to be able for the car to move. And then again, we thought we were automated because we had the manual transmission. Although I guess Robin and I probably aren't the best people to present this slide because we both still have manual transmissions. Mm-hmm. But then we look at the modern and intuitive interfaces of today with the driverless cars and the hands-free driving, and the difference is the domain knowledge is built in, it's tested, scalable, and extendable. So you shouldn't have to write those PowerShell scripts anymore. a new tool should be able to do that work for you without you having to inject all of the scripting intelligence into it. And why is this important? Yes, we know automation is important. Yes, we know control is important, right? You don't always get the control from the scripts. You need to be able to know who did what, when they did it, who approved it, how it happened, have all that governance around it, especially in larger or more secure organizations. And then, of course, the need to be audit ready. You need to be able to go back at a moment's notice and say, what configuration changes did I make over the last month or the last year? How did that affect my environment? What did it look like on this day? But to me, the most important is visibility. I talk to companies every single day that say, I have some automation, I think I have some control and auditability, but I still don't have any visibility. I have no way to see what are my configurations of my infrastructure running in my production environment. How does it compare to earlier environments? How have configurations changed between releases? They don't have that visibility. So my opinion is that automation without visibility is still lacking.
Very much so, yeah. Right. Yeah. Now, one thing that we want to sort of share with you is some of what the automation tools of today are doing. And basically, when you're upgrading an application or deploying a new application along with its configurations, it's just doing just that. It's taking the application configurations and putting them onto a set of servers somewhere within your environment and ecosystem. And that's really just like being in the middle of a forest and looking at a single tree. You know, you've got just one application, one configuration, and that's all you're focusing on. But the world is bigger than that. And what we want to sort of present to you is this idea of a continuous feedback loop, where not only are you looking at the application, but you're taking into the context of the entire forest, everything around it, what it's interacting with, what else is running around it, and what possible changes that you're making, what can those affect. So, you know, that's one of the things that we want to sort of focus on today as well, sort of that continuous feedback loop.
And to give it a good example, it really goes back to the title of the webinar, where if I make a change in my web environment, how has that affected the database schema?
That's exactly correct.
How has that affected a Windows registry key? How has that affected a file system permission?
Right.
It's all related.
So when I make a change somewhere, what else shifts?
Right.
You know,
that could cause a problem down the road. Yes.
Yes. So make that information available to you when you're making those changes, and so things.
The visibility.
Yeah, visibility.
All right, in summary here, what we see with this earthquake is taking the ability to take you from these legacy scripts and the point solutions, the automation frameworks that are keeping you in that technical debt situation and helping you move to mode 2 operations. We're all trying to get to mode 2, and you need solutions in place that help you get there without having to script everything, and can support both the area on the left, the legacy scripts, and can support those mode 2 operations on the right. All right, let's get into a demo. I'm going to show you a demo of our product Orca, and it addresses the concepts I just talked about and Robin and I just talked about in the presentation. And I know it's a shock, but this is our example of shaking up the configuration management world with that earthquake. So I'm going to hop into a quick demo, give you guys some idea of what we're talking about with this configuration management solution.
And as Christy is sort of switching over, feel free to start typing any questions that you may have thought of during the presentation.
Yes, so. Yes, we're happy to answer questions, and we'll leave some time at the end for that. All right, I am here in Orca's web-based console, and before I get too far into it, you can see that Orca is a web-based solution. It's an on-premise solution, and we manage both Windows and Unix Linux environments. And today, of course, we're going to be focusing on Windows and IIS and SQL Server configuration management. I'm also going to talk a little bit about the ability to release your applications in an automated way through Orca that ties back into configuration management. The flow for the demo is it's going to be a high-level demo. We want to try and get a lot of concepts in for you. If you would like a more detailed demo on some specific things we've shown today, we're happy to do that. You can contact us afterward. But the high-level concept I'm going to show for today is showing how you can see drifted situations in your environment, how Orca is continuously monitoring the configurations of your IIS environments, of your SQL Server environments, of your Windows environments, and automatically telling you when something's wrong and fixing that for you. That'll be the main scenario we're showing. I'm here on my dashboard right now, and this dashboard is my 50,000-foot Google Maps view of what's going on in my world. This dashboard is obviously editable per user, but the person I'm logged in as cares about their account management application. They want to keep an eye on their North America databases, on their US West data center. And the reason I like to call this the Google Maps view is because it really obfuscates any complexity in the environment. And I'm looking at about 250 servers, give or take, right here, and I can very quickly see all of the hotspots in my environment without information overload. So if I look at my account management application, I can very quickly see that in the production environment, in my SQL Server cluster, I have one SQL Server that is out of compliance or has drifted from what I know to be the standard. And I also, in production, in one of my IIS pools, have some IIS that's drifted from a standard.
Yeah, I've also had people refer to these as sort of petri dishes, where they're looking at them under a microscope or something, and you've got these little issues or problems that are generating or being identified.
Yes. Yeah. I forget who mentioned that, but now every time I look at the dashboard, I think petri dish. Yeah. But it's a very useful dashboard. Oh, yeah. And our customers have even used it to kind of put it up in a knock area, because you can have these auto refreshing. It gives you a really real-time view. This is not a viewer-only product. This is a doer product. So this is a near real-time data you're seeing. So right now, this IIS node has drifted from what I know to be true. And as long as I have permission to do so within the tool, I can dive down in and see the low-level details of that infrastructure configuration to see what needs to be fixed. All right, so a couple of things on this page. First of all, you don't need to do any scripting. This is all provided 100% out of the box. That's kind of that coming earthquake where we don't require your PowerShell scripts to work. We've already done all of that work for you. Everything you're seeing here in the demo today is supported out of the box. All you need to tell Orca is what servers are in this IIS pool or this IIS farm. In this case, I've got 2 production servers, so every time Orca pulls configuration data, it's going to pull the configuration data for both of these servers. And then we provide this inventory list that says these are the things we support for IIS or for SQL Server or for Windows operating system level things, and you can check the things that you care about us gathering configurations for. But Orca knows out of the box all the important configurations to gather for specific middleware databases and OS level things. From that point, Orca begins inventorying those configurations on a schedule, whether you want to be in production, getting them every 15 minutes or every hour or every day or week. And we get that data. We are actually running PowerShell commandlets on the back end, bringing that data back into Orca, and Orca is normalizing that data into this really human-friendly, human-readable map. So you're never having to parse XML or parse config files or look at scripts. It all comes back to you in this format, whether you're managing IIS or SQL Server or a Linux environment, what have you. And right here I can see where I have some issues in my environment. So Orca could have auto-remediated this. We have a desired state concept. So if you want a completely touch-free, hands-free configuration management solution, Orca would have detected drift or compliance issues here and automatically remediated it back to what it was supposed to look like and just let you know it made that change. But of course, that wouldn't be any fun for our demo today. I wouldn't be able to show you all the red and the yellow. So what we're seeing here on the screen is that my application pool is incorrect for this website. My website's not started, so I first of all have an availability issue. And I can dive in and see some advanced settings, and I can see that my logon method is wrong, which is a security violation. My preload isn't enabled, which is going to cause some performance issues. And from a single page, I can see what the problem is. So this could be you've just released your application into production, and the application isn't working. And you know, instead of going back to the developers and going, what's wrong with your code, you can now come into Orca and say, okay, how did my configurations change before and after the release? We keep a full revision history of all of these configurations, and you can tag important revisions. So we've got all the data for you. You can go back 3 months ago and say, what did my IIS configurations look like 3 months ago? And we'll tell you, or Orca will tell you. You can see differences between baselines. So in this case, I actually see this quite a bit. It looks like someone out of band ran maybe a PowerShell script that changed the application pool, and they accidentally typoed pool to have 3 O's instead of 2. Real life example here, actually.
Yeah, that's actually hard to catch with those.
It is really hard to catch, right? Because that application pool doesn't actually exist. It was just a quick typo. And so Orca immediately tells you, the app pool name is incorrect. This is what it's supposed to be.
Right. That's what I've drifted from.
This is what I've drifted from. And that drift can be from a gold master. That drift can be from a previous revision. It can be whatever you want that to be, whatever drift revision makes sense for you. But we also do compliance checking as well. In this case, my logon method is set to clear text, and that is a violation. And within Orca, you can create these compliance rules that say, this logon method can't be clear text. This value is not allowed to be equal to, or must be greater than or less than, or within a numeric range. And using this, whether it's validating values or tokenization or ignoring certain things, you can set up custom compliance policies so that every time Orca inventories these configurations, it's checking based on your compliance standard. All right, and I guess a couple more things I want to show here is we do have a very powerful comparison capability. Say you have deployed an application into production and things aren't running correctly, and it ran correctly in QA or UAT. In Orca, you can very easily compare between different environments. All you have to do is click on this compare to link, and you can also automate these comparison results so you don't have to do them on demand, and say you want to compare your production IIS configurations to those in UAT. Simply click on the comparison there, and we show you a side-by-side of comparison of the difference between environments. What you're seeing here on the page is that in production, we don't have the application pool blog engine. It doesn't exist. No one ever created it in production, but it does exist in UAT. We also have some differences as well. If I scroll down, you can see differences. For example, in production, my website is in clear text as opposed to in UAT, it's in interactive mode.
Right.
And this is not only a viewer comparison. You can select everything or choose what you want to select and apply from one environment to the other. So you can replicate configurations from UAT to production, for example. All right, so let me go back here and just show a bit of SQL Server, and then we're going to remediate this so you can see Orca's automation capabilities. Everything I've talked about doing for IIS, the drift, the compliance rules, the remediation, everything still applies to SQL Server. Every time we pull configurations for the web tier, we can also pull configurations for that database tier. And we're pulling everything from databases to instances to logins and roles. And within the database, we're getting everything from tables to table column configurations to your stored procedures to users assigned to the database. And again, bringing it all back in that human readable map. And what I want to point out here is even if your job is not database configuration management, if you're not a DBA, being able to see this information is still very powerful. Because if you're in charge of releasing the application or you're in charge of making sure it's configured correctly, the database is a huge component in that. So now you have the visibility into, did the schema change? Is the stored procedure correct? Did a DBA do a refresh on the database and forget to assign the right roles and permissions?
Or does this database that my application is trying to connect to even exist?
Exactly, yes.
As you said, it just comes back down to that visibility of all that configuration and information.
Right, right. So now you have all of that. And if you did make a configuration change to one portion of, or one tier of your app, Orca would immediately do an inventory of all the tiers and say, oh, an unintended change happened to the database, or an unintended change happened to something else. So before I click the remediate button to remediate this and bring us back into a fully compliant environment, I do want to give you an idea of some other things we support. We've talked a lot about that middleware and database tier, but we also understand here at Orca that your underlying OS configs are very important, and even if you are on an application team, you may have to worry about your registry keys or the features that are installed. And so Orca can pull in all of that data as well, and again, detect changes, detect drift, do comparisons. So we're getting everything from the registry to system services to all of your networking configurations and file system permissions. All of that is being captured, and you can, of course, make configuration changes to those through Orca as well.
Yeah, another takeaway for this afternoon is that no matter what type of configuration data I'm looking at, Orca is presenting it to me in this sort of same paradigm. And so once you sort of understand how to make a change in Orca, you can pretty much know how to make a change in any system, whether it's at the database level, at the application server level, at the OS level, whether you don't have to learn all these different tools in order to make these configuration changes. It's all just one standardized interface.
Exactly. Yes, you don't have to necessarily be an SME anymore.
Right.
Right. All right, what do you say we remediate IIS? So we've got this IIS node here, and let's say someone's come in and said, yes, we are ready to remediate this production environment. All you have to do in Orca is click the remediate button. You don't have to script any of this. We are going to remediate the things that need to be remediated, and before we do so, we put all of that control or that governance around the automation that is so desperately needed, showing you which nodes are going to be affected, which servers are going to be executed against, what workflow is going to be run, who needs to sign off, is there any application I'm deploying, all the configurations that are going to change, and then we give you the option to dry run it to validate those changes would be successful. We have a full calendaring mechanism, so you could schedule that for a later time for either a maintenance window or just for your next release. Or you can go ahead and execute that now, and that's going to go out and make those changes in the production environment. And to go along the governance lines, we do provide out-of-the-box approval systems in Orca, and in this case, since I'm deploying to production, I have a sign-off here where this deployment's not actually going to happen. This configuration change is not going to happen until the right people have signed off. And the correct people will get emails. They can either approve from email, or they can come in here to the system, click on this link. Once they've seen this is the workflow that's going to be run, these are all the configurations that are going to change, then come in here, see who's required to sign off, see everyone who's involved in this particular change. They can create notes. This change is good to go. And then they can either approve or reject. So again, not just automation, we're wrapping a lot of the necessary visibility around that automation, so you know what changes you're making, when they're being made, all without needing to write those PowerShell scripts.
Yeah, also within Orca you can define maintenance and blackout windows, so that if your change needs to occur during a certain time period or on a certain day of the week or day of the month, you can configure that so that those changes are coordinated.
Exactly, exactly. And I think this is going to take a minute to run. Why don't we switch gears and show a little bit about deployment?
All right, go ahead.
So we've talked a lot about configuration management. You're getting that visibility. You're getting the remediation, the drift. You can make routine configuration changes through Orca. But going hand in hand with that is being able to deploy applications and make configuration changes at the same time. Within Orca, we give you that ability to define your multi-tiered applications. These may be your in-house developed application or a COTS app you need to deploy, a common off-the-shelf application you need to deploy. And really what this section of the console is showing you is the things that will eventually be deployed. Within Orca, we can pick up where the build leaves off of your application artifacts, and we can pull from artifact repositories, we can pull from TFS, we can pull from a Windows file system, and what you're seeing on the screen here is just the ability to define the different components or the different artifacts that need to be eventually deployed out into your environment. And so what you can do is from here create both deployment and configuration change workflows that are married together. And I'll show that now. Let me go back to my ecosystems area, and I'm going to switch ecosystems. Notice my account management application is now in a compliant state, so we're good to go. We can all rest easy tonight. I'm going to go to my customer focus application, though, because that's where I want to deploy my application.
Before you get to that, there's one thing I wanted to point out.
Okay.
We sort of glanced over, and that is whenever Orca makes a change to any configuration item, it immediately does an inventory of that item's configuration right after that change. So that's how we were able to identify that the node now is back into compliance or out of that drifted state. So it automatically re-inventoried that configuration data.
Yeah, that's a really good point too, because also anytime we make a routine configuration change, anytime we deploy an application, we all automatically do the inventory after. Yeah. So we always have the latest configuration. You can do comparisons between points in time if you ever want to see what did it look like before versus what did it look like now.
Right. Now, back to deployment.
All right. I'm going to deploy an application into this acceptance environment, which again is a .NET-based application running on IIS and SQL Server. Shocking. I'm going to right-click and say execute from here, and that's going to take me to my workflow area where you can create these multi-role workflows, and you can save them off to be reused, to be promoted from environment to environment. And I can begin to build one up. For example, let's say I want to deploy an application to IIS. I can just drag and drop this role in here. I've got my customer focus application that I want to deploy. So let's say I want to deploy all the application files. I'm simply dragging and dropping here. I'm not writing any scripts to be able to do this. Orca has all the smarts built into it to do this. This is sending my application files to a target folder. Then maybe I want to apply some SQL scripts to SQL Server. And I have a specific SQL scripts application. My DBAs manage this. And we can apply any script. I know a lot of times in SQL Server environments, the DBAs are trying to manage a lot of different SQL scripts. Some need to get deployed in a certain order. Some to get deployed to some environments, but not others. And with Orca, we can manage all of that complexity for you very easily. And then also, so I've got a couple deployment steps here. But say I need to make a configuration change. Say every time I deploy to IIS, I need to recycle my application pool. You don't have to script that. We have the latest configuration for the application pool involved in the deployment, and you just click the recycle button. And after that's deployed, it's going to recycle the application pool. You can change different things about the configuration.
Actually, before you go on, there's another thing that I wanted to point out here is that Orca is super aware of the configuration changes you're making. So rather than presenting state, for example, as a text box where a user might type in a state that it needs to be, Orca is just going to present to you those options that are valid for that configuration item.
Yes, yes. So you're not going to be hand typing in on demand, which would could cause a typo as well.
Is it camel case? Is it underscored?
Right.
What's it going to be?
Yeah, you don't have to know that in Orca. We do all of that for you. And two, we've talked about making configuration changes as part of a deployment, but you can also add configurations, whether it is creating a new app pool. We have all of that built in as well. Robin, you want to be in my demo environment?
Oh, thanks.
Robin's app pool. So as part of this deployment, I'm going to recycle an existing app pool. I'm going to create a new one. You can create new websites. You can create new databases. You can add tables and columns. You can execute any command that may need to be executed, restart any service. All of that can be included as part of your deployment here in this manner, and this, of course, can be saved off and be reused for later.
And we often actually get asked about existing script investments, if we can reuse what's there as they sort of transition over into the Orca model.
Yes.
And if you want to.
Oh yeah, the answer is yes. So one of the steps we provide here, we have some generic activities, is an execute script and an execute command. We do have a concept called a Userscript Library. So if you are doing something very specific to your environment, which does happen sometimes, especially around application deployment, we support running any script, and you just put it into Orca. We can tokenize it, and then we'll ship the script out, so you don't actually have to put that script on your targets manually. We ship it out, run it, and bring back the output. And again, that can be a PowerShell script, it can be a batch script, it can be any sort of interpreted language you'd want it to be.
Right, so immediately out of the box, if you want to maintain or keep using an existing scripting investment, we'll at least make sure that you don't need to maintain copies of it all over the place. There's only one single source of truth for those scripts, and that it's going to be up to date and the correct version that's sent out each time for that automation you want to execute.
Yeah, again, you're getting still the governance, the control, the orchestration that you didn't have before.
Right.
Yeah. And the role-based access. We didn't hit on it, but we do have full role-based access.
Right.
So you can only have people that are supposed to be editing that script. I guess the very last thing, before I open it up for questions, we're going to go look at the calendar. I, of course, can schedule this. Let's do a schedule Robin's job. Robin's deploy and configuration change job.
Sounds good.
You're forever going to exist in my demo environment. We're going to do it for 1 p.m. tomorrow, and we'll save that. And then we can go over to the calendar, and it is filtered so you can see that job that's going to run tomorrow. But I can see everything if I want to look at all my different ecosystems and see everything that has run, that's going to be run, all of my, again, like Robin said, blackouts and maintenance windows. Well, with that, I think we're going to open it up for questions. Was there any high-level concept we didn't go through? We went through application, release, making configuration changes, the configuration visibility, drift, and remediate. Anything I didn't hit on that we should have?
I think at a high level that covered a lot of things.
Yeah, and we did kind of throw a lot of information out there. So let's look at questions. If you'll bear with me for just a minute.
All right.
Okay. All right, so one question we have is, does this application function against Oracle DB as well? And the answer is yes. So we do support more than just SQL Server. We support Oracle, MySQL, SQL Server, and DB2.
Right. Yeah.
And we're constantly adding to that list of supported integrations. So be sure to check out our website. We do have a page that talks about all those integrations we have. All right, so then we have another question. What are the trade-offs in using a configuration management tool such as this versus storing configurations in your version control repo? Does this go against the trend of treating everything as code, such as infrastructure as code? And Robin may want to add to this. I guess I'll start off with saying, you know, in a way, we are doing infrastructure as code, just without you having to do the coding, right? So if you look at our map, our human readable map of, I think we showed the IIS configurations in the SQL Server, that really is getting you to your end game of infrastructure as code, but without having it in that sort of YAML or declarative language syntax, because you have your source of truth. You can save those off as templates and use those to create new environments.
Yeah, and in fact, with Orca, the configuration management, the configuration data that we capture is entirely stored within Orca's own database. And as we maintain the historic versions of all that configuration data, it is essentially a version controlled system for the configuration data, and you can actually recreate a system or a middleware layer, any sort of tier of your application's configuration through Orca just by simply applying that set of configuration data to either a new server or just overwriting an existing server with that configuration. So
right.
For the most part, they are identical. It is Orca can be considered as a application as code or environment as code solution.
Yes. Okay, so we have a question, how do you transport the code to the different servers? I'll start off and you may want to interject. We are an agent-based solution, and we use agent-to-agent communication to transfer the requests to the target environments, and that is an OS level agent, so you will not need a different agent for IIS and SQL Server and all of that. It's a per OS agent, and I will say in many cases, for example, in the case of SQL Server, we don't need an agent on the SQL Server box. We can do remote connections to that SQL Server database.
Right. The way Orca works is that as long as there is a client for the API that you want to communicate with or direct access to those configuration files that need to be modified or changed, then Orca just needs an agent on those systems. Just to add on to some of what Christy has said as well, all communication between the Orca server and its agents are through a secure socket layer or TLS encryption. So there's nothing that is sent clear text, or nothing will be exposed to anybody who sort of captures an Orca packet from your network.
Another question I get a lot around this is, does the agent have to run as root or a specific user?
Right.
And Orca's agent, other than being very low footprint and running as a system service, it can run as any user. Mm-hmm. And if you do have Orca's agent running as an administrative user, depending on the connection we make, you can switch up to any user. For example, if you are using one agent to manage IIS and SQL Server, we can change credentials when we're doing things against IIS versus when we're doing something against SQL Server.
Right, and expanding a little bit on the RBAC controls as well, you can control who has that permission to run as that administrative user or who must run as a specific user when making any sort of change as well. So,
yeah.
You have that grain of, or granularity of control over the execution.
Yes. And we actually had several questions around that. One is, then do we charge by the agent? And the answer, and I'm not in sales, so but I'll take a stab at it. I believe we charge by operating system, so by agent in most cases, and the caveat is database. We charge by the SQL Server database that's being managed.
Right.
And we do also support WebSphere application server environments, and in that case, I believe it's licensed by the managed JVM. And then, so we're asking if we have an enterprise model. So we are a commercial solution. We do not have an open source version. We are an enterprise solution, and you can find information about that on the website.
Yeah, and each portion of Orca's service itself can be scaled individually. So whether it's the UI layer or the sort of business logic layer, all that can be scaled according to the demands of Orca itself.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And I think we got another question. What do you have integrations into ITSM systems? And I didn't mean to talk about this during the presentation, but we do have integrations into ServiceNow and Sharewell, and we've been getting requests for others as well that we'll be adding, so stay tuned on the website. But basically what we can do is when you make a configuration change or when you do a deployment, we can reach out to ServiceNow or Sharewell or your ITSM system and create a change request, wait for the appropriate approvals, and then kick off the job automatically. So Orca does have those bi-directional integrations into the ITSM systems and can manage all of that in a very automated fashion. One other question we got is, do you have support for rolling pools or 100% uptime? And So I guess what they're asking is maybe something around F5 integration or that load balancer integration, and the answer is yes. Whether you're making configuration changes or doing application deployments in production, you have the ability to define nodes as being pooling nodes, being part of a load balancer, and we do have out-of-the-box functionality to interact with the load balancer to take them in and out of the pools in a rolling fashion.
Yeah, just to expand on something related to that as well, Orca's communication between its sort of main console and its agents can be sort of routed through sort of different agent paths. So if you have to make deployments to different data centers and you want to deploy to maybe tens or hundreds of servers within those data centers, Orca is architected so that only one sort of communication packet would be sent to that data center and then sort of fanned out to all those other data centers.
Right.
So you're not sort of having multiples of the same sort of communication data or information being sent from one sort of central location out to the individual data centers.
Yes, yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
All right, well, with that, we've answered the majority of the questions, and if for some reason we have not answered them, it's small font, so forgive me if I haven't gone through all of them. We will get back to you. But for now, I'm going to hand it back over to Charlene to wrap us up.
Great, thanks, Christy. Really, really fascinating presentation. I really enjoyed the presentation. So thanks for showing us how Orca runs, and I'm sure the audience got a ton of great information out of it. Again, even if you think about a question after the webinar and you would like to get in touch with Christy or Robin, just feel free to reach out to any of us here at DevOps, and we'll make sure to get the questions over to them, and they will follow up with you. But for now, it is my duty to thank Christy McDougall and Robin Fuller both for joining me today on this webinar and imparting such great information. Please double check the devops.com website for future webinars. We do have a listing there on the website, as well as links to previous webinars, and this one will be included. As I said before, it is being recorded, so please feel free to check that one out. And thank you all for joining me. My name is Charlene O'Hanlon. I'm the webinar moderator, and I bid you good day. Thank you.